Navigating resource allocation in business world is not a walk in the park, but fear not, because I'm going to share with you the art of resource allocation in your projects so that your resources work for you and not against you. In the world of projects, it would be amazing if when we got our resource allocation, and I'm talking specifically about the people who are going to be assigned to your project, that it went smoothly. And what I mean by that is when we got the project, we were handed the people that we needed to have. We were going to be successful to us delivering on the project, and there was no issues and everything was perfect. The problem is that's not the reality of business, nor is that the reality in projects. What happens a lot of time with challenges when it comes to resources that we need for our project is there's a whole bunch of other variables that come into play that impact the time, energy, and effort that those resources have towards your tasks and ultimately the deliverable of the project. A lot of resources are working on multiple projects, not just yours. So there's a challenge of time. Now, the other aspect too is other resources, they may have their own things that they have to deliver on to their own managers outside of your project. Again, that's whole being split into different directions. Your resources as well, they're people. So they have vacation time, they may get sick, they may have some other obligations. So you have to take all of that into consideration when you're looking at your resource allocation for your project. So there's some very specific things that we're going to look at to ensure that you can mitigate or minimize those challenges. And so ultimately you can have something that's a little more ideal. Now, if you landed on this video hoping to get some more information on other types of resources like budget materials, etc., well, you can go to my other video on resource management that will have that information on there. Now, before we get into the tips of how to do resource allocation in projects, I want to bring your attention to this. You need to understand basics to keep your projects from failing. I created this specifically for you. And if you'd like to get your hands on it, the link is underneath this video. Understand your project resource requirement. The reason why allocation of people to your project can have so many challenges is because we're not clear as to what our project's all about. So it becomes really difficult to go, yeah, here are the people that you need in order to be successful. So it's our job as project managers to understand what those requirements are. And the biggest thing you can do for yourself is you need to go to the beginning of your project in the initiation stage. You just got your marching orders from your project sponsor. You need to get clarity now on the scope. What exactly are you doing? And I'm not just talking about the scope statement, which is a couple of sentences. I'm talking about what's in and what's out. And as soon as you do that with a deep dive, you then are going to have to go, okay, who do we need to bring this to fruition? That is so critical because then you have to negotiate with key executives and the managers of these people that they have the time to do what is needed to be done with all their other activities. So understanding those resource requirements is critical, but the first step is to understand what exactly it is that you're doing. So these both go hand in hand. So if you've ever had challenges in the past when it comes to resources, really take a look. Did you really understand what you were doing at the beginning in order to really ask for the right resources? Now you need to officially allocate those resources. So yes, you did the first part of understanding what the requirements are, but now you actually have to do some deeper dive with how much time do you need for these people? That's kind of subjective, I find a lot of times, but there's going to be one or two people, maybe three on your project, depending on the scope and scale of it, who you can honestly say you need probably 90% of the time, because they're the ones who are probably doing most of the programming, most of the build, whatever it is that you're working on. They're probably like the core person who you really need most of the project. So that becomes critical that you distinguish that at this early stage, because you're going to have to do some negotiation. You figured out what you're doing, you're figuring out who you need. Now you're doing the deeper dive to say, how much time do I really need from them and what exactly are they going to be doing? So this, again, you haven't even kicked off the project yet. You're going to have to talk, as I said before, again, this reiteration of constantly going back to your sponsor and the steering committee and the management and negotiating the time. You do not want to be doing this in the middle of your project because it creates so many headaches. You want to spend the time and effort securing the allocation for your resources, that these are the people that you're going to get. Now, I understand that there's called life and business, and sometimes resources come and go, but you want to say for these specific critical people that you have to have some guarantee that unless something out of your control, like they leave the organization, that they're going to stay within the project. It's going to help tremendously from continuity, consistency, and really meeting your timelines on your projects. If you have your core people who are really important to you, consistently finishing everything up to the end. Now, before we get on to the next tip, not only do I have this great free content here on YouTube, I have this. If you want to go to the next step with me and you want to learn more at a premium level, you can enroll in Slay Project Management. It's the exact process I use for all my clients, including all the tools you'll need. I've put the link in the description box below. Okay, so you've done all the proper preparatory items for your resources, getting your people, getting the right people. Awesome, congratulations. Your resource allocation and management does not stop there. It actually continues throughout the project lifecycle. So there's a couple of things that I want you to consider. One is they're not your team members, so you're gonna have to have really good connectivity with them, see how they're doing, give them the support that they need. But more importantly, you wanna bring them through team development, because now as an allocated resource, you wanna make sure that they're doing what they need to do. But you also want to now start managing other managers and steering committee, because this is what happens a lot of the times. You've done your due diligence, you've got your resources in the middle of the project because management does not understand your project or how necessarily team development works, that they pull someone off, even though you got some guarantee that they're gonna stay on. Oh no, we got this other project. You're gonna have to do some management around it. You're gonna have to now talk to them and teach them that every single time someone gets pulled, it impacts how the project is running from a team development perspective. So all teams, this is why your resource allocation is really important, goes through 4 specific stages: forming, storming, norming, performing. And every single time something changes, like a person gets added or taken away and added, or scope changes, they all go through that stage. Now, what's really important for projects and resources is you want everyone to be in norming and performing, but every single time someone gets pulled out, you go back to the forming and the storming stage. Now, how quickly you get through all of that is how well you manage things. So that's why it's not just about, at this point in time with the resource allocation, looking to your team, because your team is dedicated, you've done your due diligence with everything they need to be successful. You're going to be managing senior management, your steering committee, and your sponsor. They have to be aware that every single time they decide to pull someone, it has an impact. Do not have them just do it willy-nilly. They have to give really good reasoning and thought as to why they're pulling this particular person. Because I've had that on projects. A key developer working on something, and then all of a sudden, literally at a critical point, they get pulled because there's this other important project that came about. But if they just gave this developer another 4 more months to finish what they're doing, then they could have, again, finished what we're doing really successfully and then pulled them on the other project, or at least do kind of like a trade-off, but that just wasn't happening. They just pull it and dump in, and then they wonder why things are now taking longer, because you got to bring everybody through that process. So it's a very interesting aspect, because now this also links to dependencies. You got to understand that people are linked to activities, and activities are linked to timelines, and timelines are linked to the deliverable and when you're going to get things done. And to think that people, you can just plop them in and it's not going to have an impact is not showing that you don't have an understanding of how projects work. And I'm not talking about you, because you're here to learn about project management. I'm talking about the senior executives, the upper management. There's an education that we have to do, and that's why you're going to continually manage your resources and to ensure that you have what was promised to you in the beginning. Now that you know what you need to do when it comes to resources for project management around people, right? The planning, the allocating, and then the managing, we got this. Do you understand the 6 basics to keep your projects from failing? I created this specifically for you. This is based on my own experience. I highly recommend that you download it. How can you do that? Well, guess what? The link is below. And since you're working with people, guess what? You need a solid communication plan, so watch this next video. On that note, if you really like this content, please give it a like, join our community, and I'll see you at the next video.